Yeah, whatever, blacklist. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Game Changer Chats. As you know, I am Tevis Trower, the author of the Game Changer's Guide to Radical Success. I started this chat series specifically because I am passionate that we don't have to limit our lives to checking the boxes that the world has said matters or that make us matter. And that all of us have within us a mandate not just to be quote unquote successful, but to really figure out what is going to make us radically successful in our own terms. And so I sit down periodically 3 or 4 times a month with folks who I feel like in some way bring that to life, because I feel like all of us need more exemplars, more conversations, more exploration around what it is to live this way, and that it's not going to kill you. It's actually going to make you more alive. So before I dive in with this week's guest, who I'm thrilled to share with you, just a quick tech note. We are simulcasting on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And so wherever you're joining from, if you would like to join into the conversation, please do. Just know that it's kind of a mystery, a technological mystery, exactly which of these platforms chats are made apparent to us. So if we see a comment or a question from one of you, we will absolutely try to answer it real time. And if we don't see it, then we will come back in a couple hours and we will address them. So I solemnly swear to do that. I know that Leilani does too. And meanwhile, thank you so much for joining us. I am here with Leilani Henry, who I've known for many years. I know her to be a cultural strategist in corporations. So she's worked with huge companies like Lockheed Martin and Honeywell. She has worked with media companies. She has also been a consultant for some of the most impressive leadership strategy companies on the planet, like the Ariel Group. And what I'm excited to share with you, not just this woman in this professional context, but every way that she has called upon herself to step forward into the world and take action in the ways that she sees that action is needed. So with that, I introduce to you Leilani Henry.
Hello. Great to be here.
And I'm going to start as I always start, and that is, what did you most love to do as a young one? The reason that I ask this, in case anyone has seen this a million times, and you're like, why does she always ask that question? Is a lot of times, anyone who's ever done a podcast or been on camera knows that the minute it goes live, a lot of times we just automatically go into face mode, right? And when we start with childhood and love, it drops us back into what's real and what's eternal about us. So I'm going to ask you, Leilani, what did you most love as a young one?
Dance is my first love, and it still is. So my mother was doing the hula in Honolulu while she was pregnant.
Oh, beautiful.
So I came out doing the hula, and then she did dance classes, and I was, as an infant watching. And dances stayed with me. And I did some theater in elementary school, and I played the book fairy. So books have always been important also.
And what did you think that you were going to be when you grew up? Did that question come up? Did people ask you that?
In 8th grade, I found a diary entry that talked about psychology. So I loved my 8th grade teacher, and that was when psychology was born.
Yeah. So take us through this arc, because I know you grew up in Honolulu or Hawaii, and that you somehow migrated to Minnesota, which I really love the juxtaposition of those two cultures. How did that happen? And what did it give you?
Well, I actually was only born in Honolulu and was there a year. My father was in the Navy, so we went from Hawaii, West Coast, East Coast, and then he went to the University of Minnesota. That's how we landed in Minnesota when he retired from the Navy. And started out in Minneapolis in student housing, very international, very, very fulfilling. did classical ballet, and just, it was the perfect life until we moved to Rochester, Minnesota. And I was the only Black girl, except for my brother, in elementary school.
Wow.
So that was a huge shock. And of course, it was then shopping center dance rather than, professional dance studio. So there's a lot of things that I had to manage. And one of those was just growing up in a multicultural community and then being very homogenous.
Wow. What was it like being the only Black kid other than your brother?
Well, my parents made it easy. My mother was my Girl Scout leader, and she stepped in first day one. She was the leader, 40 girls. So that was normal. And I called her Mrs. Gibbs, like everyone else. And so she wanted to just normalize things for me. And it wasn't an issue until dating. And then I wasn't dating, and I felt left out and weird. And then the hair thing. And there, some things like that were made me stick out. Rochester was a wonderful place to grow up. And for the most part, it was very liberal and very welcoming. And then my father was a civil rights activist, and he made sure that the community welcomed us, as well as new families of color that moved to Rochester.
Yeah. What do you feel like? Because from what I understand, and we've got a little bit of an echo, which bums me out, but I don't know what to do about it. What do you feel like the legacy is for you moving through the world as a young woman, having both been different and had people around you bridging to normalize being an outlier?
So say the question again.
Well, I'm just curious because I know you went to Howard, right?
Spelman.
Yeah, you went to Spelman, which is Ivy League, let's face it. Right? And you were your same like radical self that you've been your whole life.
Yeah.
You were very self-expressed. I hear from the grapevine of our long friendship that you were actually nominated homecoming queen.
I was by Morehouse. I was
by Morehouse. Okay. So I guess what I'm saying is this ability to dance in and out of both being true to yourself and existing in kind of tradition and allowing it to help you win, right? Because I can't imagine that you were a very conformist college student either.
Right.
So what was that like? I mean, did you ever feel like you were being pressured to be what people thought you should be by the time you were in college and kind of preparing to move into the world? What's it been like for you?
Well, I went to Spelman and also took classes at Morehouse to round out my education of culture. I didn't want to be that Black girl growing up in a white environment and not knowing how to be in a Black culture.
Yeah.
So that's why I went. And it was a mixed experience because nobody even knew where Minnesota was. They laughed at my accent. I had a very thick Minnesota accent.
Here you were in Atlanta.
Yeah, in Atlanta. People knew Prince, and that was about it. So I was on the fringe in many ways. And I didn't have a Black sound, so I wasn't in theater and dance, which was a real loss for me. So I think I found other ways to connect. Most of my friends were celebrating Pride Month before Pride Month was in existence. And so we were all fringe together, right? Yeah. And that was helpful.
So you said you found other ways to connect, because I think this is a huge skill of folks who feel called to remain true to themselves and to function in the world. How did you find to connect, aside from finding the other outliers, right? The gay people or the this people or the people who have a different accent, etc. what social skills helped you to show people that you were not other?
Well, I loved learning.
Mm.
So that, I love school and I love learning. And I taught, I was with a group of people, mostly Morehouse men, that we were tutors for kids on Saturdays. And I did that every Saturday for 4 years. So giving back was one of the things that I learned, how to be of service and help people that were, less fortunate than me. So that was one of the things. And then, I had pockets of friends everywhere. It wasn't like I didn't have friends. It was just I was very aware that I was just not quite in the center of the action. So when I became homecoming queen, that was a shock for me. I was okay. And when I reflect back on it, I found this speech at some point. I had used the word positive at least 3 times in my speech. So this positive outlook, positive way of thinking of others, that was the way that I managed, and that was how I was raised. So just that positive outlook.
Positivity. I love that. So your career trajectory has been to be a cultural agitator. Black woman going into corporate America, helping people be. I mean, how would you
Yeah.
how would you explain to people what you felt like you were called to offer?
Well, I think I'm a natural facilitator. And that has always been. I mean, my father insisted on Toastmasters in 6th grade.
Oh, Jesus.
So
I'm afraid of Toastmasters now, and I'm 52 and I talk everywhere. I'm like, they're going to ding me every time I say,
yeah, it was some kid leadership program. So there was always an expectation for leadership. And because and my mother taught mentally and physically challenged preschool kids with no arms and legs, couldn't speak. So the different spectrum that I was involved in early on just stayed with me. So it seemed like I was always facilitating, getting people to communicate and speak to each other and be honest and share their feelings. So that's a natural skill. And so that's what I did in corporate America. And also being an Aquarian, being that edgy around all voices are heard, and it doesn't matter how edgy you are, you need to be heard. So we did a lot of high performance work team training at Lockheed Martin. And at Honeywell, I did the first, co-designed the first diversity inclusion. And our motto was, you are unique, Y-O-U, unique. So this idea that we all make a difference just has stayed with me my whole life.
What year was that?
Honeywell, late 80s, early 90s.
Whoa. Yeah, DEI&B, like it's something new.
Right.
A lot of us have been agitating for this stuff for 40 years.
Yeah.
40 years.
40 I just told a group of people the other day, they were so excited they were doing DEI work. And said, oh, well, my parents just don't know. I said, well, maybe they don't know, but it's certainly been around a long time.
Yeah. It's an interesting moment, I feel like, for people who have been working with the human question and going to work every day, right? And I read a quote in an article saying that work has been dehumanized. And I thought, au contraire, work is being humanized. It was already dehumanized, right?
Yes.
And so I'm curious for you, as you moved in to Lockheed Martin, in 1980.
No, Lockheed Martin was in the 90s.
Okay,
Yeah.
the 90s.
Honeywell,
but even so, that's 30 years ago, right? I'm just curious, what kind of stake helped them move forward with the programs you were talking about. And what did you even call yourself? Were you a diversity person?
No, OD consultant.
OD, yeah. Yeah. So it's changed a lot and you've evolved a lot. I'm actually really interested in sharing with people one of the various modalities I know that you use, the brain gem stuff, that you've not only been working with the cultural bridging, right? That we find that unique, right? And that we meet people where they are, but also that we work with our own brains. Because if we're not working with our own brains, anything that we do is going to be superficial. Talk a little bit about what you've learned by helping people work to have a more pliable brain.
Well, I think the first thing is that it's about coherence with the heart and the mind.
Yeah.
And then when we think about the brain, we think about the whole body, that you have brain cells in your whole body.
Yeah.
So, it's not from the neck up. So that's why the movement oriented practices are important, because it is your whole body that's involved in intelligence.
Yeah.
And then the heart intelligence is amazing. And then when we're in coherence, then we can move forward in the world without the doubt, without the self-consciousness, being more of service. So I just feel like that's important to continue to help people to be accountable for what they're thinking and feeling, along with, how they interact with others. And it's easier to be empathetic if you're feeling good.
Well, and I think the misnomer that our breakthroughs come from how we think, and that our wisdom lies in this thought engine, as opposed to the whole body of wisdom that all of us have access to. And so I'm really excited with a lot of the work I'm seeing that bears this out, both from a neurological perspective, from a science perspective. But let's just be clear. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that up until now has been called woo-woo, or has been called soft skills, that actually are the hardest skills there are, right? The skill of mastery of self is the age-old cross-cultural, that's the gold ring on the merry-go-round, right? The mastery of self. And so I think that the dignity of the work that you've been doing for so many years is hopefully coming of age in a funny way.
I think so. I mean, you and I met at a Buddhist retreat for 10 days. We meditated for 45 minutes, a couple of times a day, as I remember, maybe 3 times. And at that point, that was woo-woo. I think that was 2004 or so, right?
I think so.
And that was
12. I was 12.
Yeah. I was 15. So that was an amazing experience. And so to me, that was the beginning of, because it was an authentic leadership conference. It wasn't just meditation, it was authentic leader. So we were on the cutting edge of, guess what? It's your whole self.
Yeah. And I know that both of us knew, even at that conference, that we had things that we could have been presenting on.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's been a groundswell for quite a while.
Right. Yeah.
This whole authenticity game. So you have been working your authenticity above and beyond the work that you do in corporations, which I encourage anyone who's looking for coherence work, for DEI work, to talk to my girl here. But you've been living it above and beyond your professional pursuits, and you have been creating. And I want you to invite people on this journey that you've been on, of exploring your father's role as being the first human being of African descent to step his foot in Antarctica. I mean, this journey has taken you to Antarctica. It's tell us, like, and oh, by the way, she's not Bill Gates. She's not wealthy. She's married to an artisanal kaleidoscope maker. I mean, so a lot of times we can see the output of others and think, oh, well, they must have a lot of money, or oh, well, they don't have the commitments or the burdens, or I do. And so I just want to say, not so, right? We all have commitments and stuff that we're juggling, but share with everyone about what this journey of really uncovering your father's trailblazing life.
Well, it took, it's taken a lot of courage. And 20 years ago, so he died November of 2000 on his birthday.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And then a few months later, early 2001, my mother found his diaries in the back of a dresser that had fallen down. He thought he lost them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there they were.
That's
He wrote every day for 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Excuse me, on a 66-year-old wooden ship called the USS Bear. And they worked 14, 16 hours a day, and he still was able to write a paragraph every day. And I have tried to do 6 months of journaling.
Of daily journaling.
I haven't done it yet. So anyway, he had hired or had worked with a writer who was an editor at the St. Paul Pioneer Press. And we met, and she said, I got to give all this stuff back to you because I'm going to have children and I don't have time. So it was just, I had to do it. And I hated doing it in the 20 years, right? I stopped and started. I don't want to be a starving artist. Why am I doing this? I mean, it's been an amazing.
My corporate work pays me so much more. What am I doing? Why am I spending time on this? So you dive in, you start to understand what it was for him to play that role.
Yeah.
What did you learn about him?
Well, I learned, first of all, because I got all his files. So he was at IBM, I got all his leadership files. Realized that our careers were similar. And I never knew that growing up. I never knew what he did, right? He was in personnel. That's all I knew. Personnel. So I ended up in human resources. I'm like, oh my gosh. So it was very interesting to see his take on leadership, and very similar, motivational speaker. I mean, all those things. And I learned how valuable that lesson was that he learned. He was 22, 23 when he was on the ship, and he was the lowest rank, the mess attendant. And that was all that Blacks could do because of segregation and Jim Crow. So he talked about, wanting that wasn't fair, and why in the world would you waste a talent when people have all kinds of skills? Why don't you just place people doing the skills and the jobs that they can do? So that was the beginning of his civil rights activism, I think. Wow. And he worked with Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a famous explorer. There's a book, actually, my father was going to write a book, The Last Explorer. I found one of his chapters. And Admiral Byrd was an amazing leader in many, many ways, especially to the people that worked for him. Everybody loved him. He treated, he was cared about people their whole life. So those roots of leadership and civil rights activism and all voices heard and people being contributors and working hard, that all started on the Bear.
Wow. When you first stepped foot in Antarctica and you thought about your father, what was that like for you?
Well, I have a photo of me that'll be in my book coming, The Call of Antarctica, and it's me by a glacier, and I just finished crying. So you can't tell that I crying, but I was very touched to be in the environment where they practically gave their lives. I mean, there were a couple of times when they thought they were going to either not make it, or one time they couldn't find the ship. They had gone on an adventure. So yeah, it was humbling. I also, speaking of the money, I mean, I raised money to go. And so just to think about all the people that wanted me to succeed and then to be there. And what's funny, you mentioned Bill Gates, because I flew to Antarctica on the same trip that Bill Gates took.
I vaguely remember that. I think that may have been why the Bill Gates example was in my head. So the other thing that crosses my mind is not just the gratitude about who allowed you to be there, etc. Could you feel the gap of the decades of the years of progress? Because he was there in what year?
He was there from 39 to 41. They took 2 round trips on a ship. Yeah, they sailed from Boston round trip and then from Philadelphia round trip.
And I don't know what kind of insulation they had in those days.
No.
Right? I mean,
it was freezing. Yeah.
So the Jim Crow perspective that he brought, and asking these very provocative and very logical. I mean, forget the provocative questions, right?
Yeah. Right.
The logical questions, the sensible questions about why wouldn't we all be invited, right, to contribute our most. I mean, as you stepped on the ice, were you also aware of yourself here, 70 years later? And that kind of, hopefully, evolution and consciousness. Was there evolution? Has there been evolution?
I think yes and no also. I mean, human beings in a way, what bothers me is that our technology, our consciousness hasn't caught up with our technology.
So our technology is evolving by leaps and bounds, and we are, the algorithms here are not as easily programmed as our technology.
Yeah. So there's some sadness and also some joy that, yes, of course, there are things that have evolved, of course. And in fact, this shows it. So when I was in the early 2000s, I thought my toughest job was going to be explaining Jim Crow. Well, how am I going to explain this? It doesn't make sense, right? This is the year 2000. I mean, we're not dealing with that now, right? And so it took, all these years to finish and pull it together. And at one point, a couple of years ago, I was like, oh, well, I don't need to explain Jim Crow now.
Yeah. And it's still so hard to explain, even what's going on in Oklahoma, right?
Yeah.
So you are a change agent, and you have a game changer. We decided that change agent is too limiting because it says that you're going to agitate inside of an existing game that makes no sense. But when you game change, that's when you're saying, no, what we're playing for needs to be more coherent, to go back to your word. And I want to share with everyone, because I love bragging about my amazing friends. Hang on, let's see if I can get it here. I want to share with everyone. Can you hear that?
Hello? I wish to speak to Mahatma Gandhi. What for? Because everyone is quoting him, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Nice quote. Didn't you know that change is hard for humans? People are complex. Their lack of understanding and empathy breeds fear, anger, and violence. I don't even want to be a part of the human race anymore.
I know a lot of us feel that way sometimes, and yet it's our humanity. It's so funny. We say human race and we go, oh, but we say humanity, and we're invoked back into beauty, right? We're called back. You have been working not only on this wealth of research in relation to your dad, the creation of these countless modalities and programs for corporations who employ hundreds of thousands of employees, literally. And you also have little creative pursuits. You've created games. I mean, what, before we got on, I said, how are you? And you said, oh, I just have so many projects. Your book is coming out in October. I encourage everyone to pre-order it. We're going to put it in the show notes afterwards. And I just want to acknowledge Shomek, who spoke up and express his appreciation of this conversation, as well as Shauna. And there may be others whose comments we're not seeing. But we were talking about how if you have a conviction that we have an option to make our life be of consequence, that the plethora of opportunities through which we exert our skills and genius, right, through which we try, they all just, it's kind of like whack-a-mole, right? They all just pop up and we go, oh my God.
Right.
And
exactly.
It's the burden and the blessing of mattering and of wanting to matter. So I'm curious, just kind of as a parting note, because everyone can learn a lot more about you at beingandliving.com and also through your book. But what would be your counsel? Because my book is all about reminding people that you can still be successful in the whatever world you've chosen and be true to yourself, right? And so what counsel would you share with people about allowing themselves to matter?
Well, I have a couple of ways to answer that, because I care about the environment, and my book really is making a 20th century story into a 21st century story, and where we find ourselves in an environment that we need to pay attention to. So I think my counsel is pay attention to your internal environment, your inner environment, and that makes a difference for the external environment, that they aren't separate. How we treat each other, how we treat ourselves is the same as how we treat the environment, and the environment will support us if we support it.
Yeah, I think that's really great counsel. So I want to thank you, Leilani. And I want to say to all of you, if these ideas, a lot of times people say to me, but Tevis, how do you do that? And it is incredibly doable, using both the kinds of tools that Leilani teaches around coherence, as well as the tools in the Game Changers Guide. It's not a light lift, because it calls for all of us to pay attention and to align our actions with our thoughts and our words. And but I lead people through this, and I would welcome you. I also have a retreat coming up in July with one of my best friends, who's a septuagenarian shaman. And I've been studying with her for 4 years, and we're going to take folks out and spend a bunch of time on the earth and teach them the power of the natural world to both guide, inform, ground, and center, and influence and enhance our ability to be of consequence in a beneficial way. So I thank all of you for joining this Game Changer chat. I'm going to have a founder, former techie, who pivoted completely and changed her life into being one of a natural fragrance company. Very she, right? And but she's incredibly grounded, and she will be a delight. I also have Stella Lupashore coming towards the end of the month, who is an agitator in ageism and the feminine in corporations, and she's created some a nonprofit through which they're doing some huge research on this topic. So everybody, thank you for joining me. As usual, I'm always thrilled to have more game changers. I can't get my head on straight. To have more game changers along on the ride. Leilani, thank you. You are a blessing and a gift on this planet.
Thank you, Tevis. It's really a delight.
Bye, everybody.